Hello everyone and welcome to the first episode of the Major Region Rundown. I'll be doing a video on each of the major regions across the world heading into Worlds 2025. Today's episode is about the LPL. These videos serve as information pieces to give you an idea of all the strengths and weaknesses of the teams participating, so let's get into it. Let's start with the LPL's number 1 seed, the summer champions Bilibili Gaming. In the top lane, we have Bin, sharing time in the jungle, Beixuan and former Mad Lions jungler Shadow. In the mid lane, the golden left hand, Knight, AD carry Elk and support On. BLG this year has been a little bit of a rollercoaster. They ended last year with Xun and Wei on the same roster as their starting junglers. Wei won the LPL finals with BLG and Xun was the starter for most of Worlds, making it all the way to the grand finals. Going into 2025, they started their year with Wei and dropped Xun, who joined JDG. Winter didn't go as planned for them as they finished 4th and they missed out on first stand. Midway through spring, however, they swapped out Wei for Beixuan and things started to click again. The team had a little bit of a honeymoon period and won 8 out of their 9 regular season series to qualify for playoffs in 4th. That form continued all the way until they fell short to AL in the playoffs, but still qualified to MSI as the 2nd seed. At MSI, they failed to live up to expectations. T1 swept them to the lower bracket in round 2, and after struggling to take down FlyQuest, they fell to AL for a 3rd time, this time in a clean sweep. Things got even worse at EWC, where they exited the tournament in round 1 after losing to G2. Going into summer, they signed Shadow to share time with Beixuan and had another honeymoon period with a new jungler. As it wore out, however, Beixuan started to come back in as the starting jungler for the first round of playoffs. It was in their series against top Esports in the winners finals where they were down 1-2. They subbed in Shadow, who helped them win the series, and a similar story happened in the grand finals, where Shadow was out for the first match but came in when they were 0-1 down to win the LPL title with 3 straight wins. Overall, this team's identity is still somewhat similar to last year in the sense that they're insanely skilled mechanically and a very strong early game team, but they've had several moments in the season where they just throw away these gold leads. Shadow is a familiar face most will remember from Mad Lions, famous for his Lee Sin. He's added depth to his champion pool and he's been running the map early in some matches. On had quite a little bit of a dip in performance during MSI, but has been looking much more consistent and less coin flip recently. He's also quite a deadly player when it gets to game 4 and 5, you have to be very careful of his Elise. The players to watch for me on this team, however, are definitely just the solo lanes. For me, Knight is just the rock on this team. He's consistently a top tier mid laner in the world and just owns this region. There's a reason why he's the 6-time LPL champion and was voted first All-Pro mid in both splits 2 and 3. He's definitely one of the best mids in the world, no question about it. Bin, on the other hand, had a little bit of a slump in summer. He wasn't even a top 3 top laner in the regular season, but had a massive glow up during playoffs. If you can keep this form for Worlds, then I think the caliber of player in the top lane that BLG have might help them make a deep run once again. Next, we have Anyone's Legend, who qualified as the 2nd seed for having the most championship points. In the top lane, we have veteran world champion Flandre. In the jungle, Tarzan. In the mid lane, Shanks, AD carry Hope, and as support, Caedrel. This team came out of nowhere to become one of the best stories in the LPL. For years, this organization's been stuck at the bottom. The foundation started to be built in 2024 summer with the inclusion of Tabe as head coach, one of the most successful coaches in the LPL, with a track record of turning struggling teams into winning ones, which saw them make playoffs for the very first time. For the upcoming 2025 season, they built around their mid and bot lane and brought in veterans like Flandre and Tarzan and ended up winning the Demacia Cup. Immediately after, Winter Split came around and they finished 2nd, and then improved on that by winning their first title in spring, qualifying to MSI. At MSI, they looked like the hope of the LPL. Despite losing, they took Genji and T1 to 5 games respectively at MSI, and proved they could compete with the best, and were a cut above the LPL's 2nd MSI seed, BLG, who they dominated with a 3-1 win in spring finals and a 3-0 sweep at MSI. This is a team that thrives on fighting, engaging, diving, team fighting around every objective. If there's an objective on the map, it's almost guaranteed that AL will fight it. Sometimes it works, other times it backfires, but it's their identity. Post MSI and EWC, they fell off a bit during LPL summer, only finishing 4th in the regular season, and while they did manage to mount a solid lower bracket run during the playoffs, they bowed out in 3rd. It looked to me like they were a little bit stuck on old metas for the start of summer and they never really fully caught up. They tended to overforce and fight around objectives a little bit unnecessarily, which led to them losing games. The heart and the soul of this roster is their jungle top duo for me. Flandre is just the guy who will make the team function. He's not a flashy player or a montage player, but he is the space creator for the team and can fill any role AL need in the draft and in the game. And then there's Tarzan. Honestly, I don't think I'm exaggerating when I say he's probably the best jungler in the world right now. From his creativity to his deep champion pool, he's definitely the player to watch on this roster. As the third seed, we have Top Esports. In the top lane, we have 369, in the jungle, Kanavi, in the mid lane, Cream, at AD carry, we have former world champion Jackie Love, and in support, Hung. Coming out of 2024, they decided to bring in Kanavi from JDG to replace TN, and also traded Hung for Crisp earlier on in the year. They also briefly trialed Urha, their substitute, in spring, but since Split 3, Hung has been the starting support. This year actually started off pretty well for Top Esports, with a lower bracket run in Split 1 playoffs, which ended in them beating 5 different teams to win it all, and qualify as the LPL representative to first end. Things quickly took a turn for the worst, however, as they went 1-3 in groups, losing to CFO and KC before getting swept by Hammerlife Esports in the semi-finals. At this point, I'm just convinced that Top Esports as an organization is just cursed. It seems like despite usually being a top contender domestically, they always end up falling flat, whether it's internationally or qualifying to those events. Let's look at the last few years, for example. At 2020 Worlds, they were the #1 seed, one of the favorites in the tournament, and they lost to Suning, the LPL 3rd seed, in semi-finals. In 2021, they didn't even make it to Worlds. In 2022, they crashed out in group stage with losses to Rogue and GAN. In 2023, they got eliminated in regionals by Bilibili Gaming despite having Rookie on their roster. In 2024, they lost in a 3-0 fashion to G2 at MSI and then were swept by T1 in the quarterfinals. So, no matter how good they look domestically, they'll always have that quote-unquote choker tag hanging over them until they can really overcome it. This summer, they looked really solid, however, finishing first in the regular season, where 3 of their 5 players were first All-Pro. In the playoffs, they narrowly lost the title to BLG. On their best days, this can be the strongest team in the LPL. They really just need to show up when it matters the most. For me, 369 has shown incredible form throughout all the playoffs. However, Cream, on the other hand, gives me some concerns with his current form and will need to step it up internationally. Kanavi is still a top-tier jungler, and he contests Tarzan as possibly the best jungler in the LPL. Jackie Love at this point is someone everyone's familiar with. He's still in great form, and he won the MVP award for Summer Split, putting up big numbers. But at the same time, he still has this habit of stepping up a little bit too far or getting caught before a fight starts. I mean, in the upper bracket finals against BLG, he was stepping way too far forward sometimes and getting punished and throwing away leads. There's also rumors that this might be his last year as health problems have been hinted at, so Jackie Love could be looking for his last chance at redemption internationally. Wrapping it up for the LPL 4th seed is Invictus Gaming. In the top lane, we have the best player in the world, Shy. In the jungle, we have Wei. In the mid lane, we have Rookie. At AD carry, it's Gala, and support is Mako. Invictus Gaming haven't really been a relevant organization for many years, but this year, with new investors coming in, they decided to rebuild and go all in. And when I say rebuild, I mean actually bringing back players that got them a World Championship in 2018, Rookie and Shy returning to the organization. They rounded off the roster with other top-tier players, a truly star-studded roster. They had an awful showing in winter, and while spring was a little bit better, they decided to make a change, bringing in Wei for Summer Split to replace JJ. In summer, they finished second in the regular season, and things looked pretty promising with the new jungler. But they bombed out of playoffs, losing 3-1 to BLG, followed by getting swept by AL and finishing outside of the top 4. It didn't really stop there either. They got into regionals and got absolutely dumped by Top Esports. It was not even close. I will say the only reason this team is at Worlds or even has a chance to qualify to the Worlds main event is because of Gala. In their last chance qualifier against JDG, Gala dragged them across the finish line with some excellent games. Shy was actually first team All-Pro top laner during the summer split, Rookie and Mako coming in second All-Pro. But both of those two slumped pretty hard when it came to playoffs and regionals. Rookie especially has struggled a little bit to look like his old self. Wei, who was brought over from BLG after starting the year with JJ, had a few promising games in summer, but his playoffs performances were a little bit disappointing. He just looks a little bit outclassed by the other top LPL junglers. This team is by far the most inconsistent team from the LPL. The names are there, but in order for this superstar roster to even compete in the main stage, they'll have to get through T1 first, and that's not going to be an easy task. To me, IG is just the wild card. They're not as polished as BLG, they don't have the systems that AL have, they don't have the consistency of Top Esports, but they have star power and clutch factor, and that can win you games. The question is, will those stars align? To round out these major region rundown videos, I really want to include a domestic caster from each region to share their thoughts of their league coming into Worlds 2025. So for the LPL, we decided to go with Nymaera, who's covered basically every game of the LPL this year. I'm going to toss it over to him.
How to sum up the LPL in 2025? We've had 800 games since the start of the year, so there is so much ground to cover. But if I were to sum up the LPL this year in a single word, change. Since this time last year, the end of summer going into Worlds for the LPL in 2024, to now, there have been 80 roster changes across the entirety of the LPL. And that's between, yes, 16 teams, but that's included many of our teams that went to Worlds as well last year. Multiple teams that went to Worlds in terms of Weibo, LNG, completely changed effectively their entire rosters. BLG, the team that went to Worlds Finals, lost Shun, their jungler. And it felt like the LPL was just going through an entire renovation. Teams that we thought were tried and true or just part of the landscape in the LPL were no longer that. Weibo massively changed. JDG, I think over the course of this entire year, had 7 roster changes. So trying to go through this year choosing a favorite, choosing teams right from the start of it who would be out and out best teams in our league was very, very difficult. LPL for the last few years has had one dominant team. That has not been the case this year. We've had 3 splits and 3 different champions. Top Esports in winter, Anyone's Legend in spring, and then BLG in the grand finals in summer. I wasn't sure what to expect going up to the end of this year because a lot of the LPL, from my perspective, who sat there through so many different games for so many different teams, similar storylines approached a lot of different teams. A search for cohesion, a search for chemistry, and a lot of fighting their own demons. And bluntly, the demons won the majority of the time here in LPL this year. We've had teams cobble it together for certain playoffs runs. We've had them find these brilliant patches of form, but not necessarily able to stick to it through the time span which they'd want to. But I think we're starting to get it together now at the end of playoffs. When I look at the LPL teams that we're sending this year in 2025, I see 4 very different teams. BLG are early skirmishers, they often win through lane, and their mechanical prowess on high mobility team comps is so insane. They have had worries around objective play and around late game fights. I think that BLG for a lot of the split did very much stand for bad late game. They struggled a lot in that aspect. They threw around Barons and Atakan on cooldown, it felt like. But you cannot deny how crazy they are at running with an early lead with high playmaking. And it was such a vibes-based team, changing the junglers for the honeymoon buff does seem to reset them mentally. They found a way to make that work. I was not a believer on it, but color me surprised, and seems to be working for them. I think that On really needs to have a good tournament, though. Those vibes need to be on point for him. For someone with such highs and such lows, it's so often shown in On. And when BLG have a bot lane lead, it just goes so well for them. On the other side of the spectrum, you have probably Top Esports and Anyone's Legend, who are more methodical. Top Esports, the most likely team to take an objective area, blackout vision, win through that. More LCK style play. 369 on tanks, Kanavi, really the heart and soul of this team, and we have Jakilov maybe with his last dance ever. Jakilov's talked about his health issues. This might be the last year we see Jakilov in pro play. What a career he's had. Top Esports, the more methodical side of things. Anyone's Legend in there too. I think they more play around their jungle support. You know about them. It's not too dissimilar from Anyone's Legend from MSI. I think that individual player form, their drafts, and their objective play has taken a hit from MSI though. They need to get snappy on this meta. If they don't catch up soon, I'm worried for them. I think that Flandra, Shanks, and a little bit of Kyle as well have struggled individually. They need to step up to the plate. And then, of course, we have Invictus Gaming. Well and truly, a dice roll, a wildcard, entirely vibes-based. Changed out JJ for way midway through the year. And the chemistry does seem to be there. Their early games are really shoddy at points, but if they allowed to build onto a meta, if they're allowed to build into a series so destructive around big team fights, I think some of their drafts have been fantastic. Rookie on stuff like Swain has been fantastic. And I think I have to put my eyes on the Shy there, actually. I think the Shy, which I'm sure Caedrel will be very happy to see as well, has had some awesome individual performances. He's much less coin flippy than he was before. But as a whole, I do think the LPL needs this victory on an existential baseline level. The LPL has not had an international title win since 2023 MSI, the JDG Golden Era, and the LPL is struggling, I think, in terms of fan engagement, in terms of financially. Close is not enough. A 5-game Worlds Finals is great, but it's not enough. The LPL, on a spiritual level, needs this Worlds victory. If they have to go through T1 to do it, so be it. They have to beat their demons. LPL, show me what you got. Maybe one team can dice roll into the right meta for them. They need this win.
That was all for the major region rundown for the LPL. Stay tuned for many more videos coming about all the other major regions. I will of course be co-streaming all of Worlds on my Twitch channel over at twitch.tv/Caedrel starting on October 14th with T1 versus IG. Make sure you're there.